You're listening to the official podcast of the Westside Vineyard in Los Angeles, a community of individuals and families connecting with God to change the world.
So I want to extend, again, just the joy of this weekend, hoping that it is. 3-day weekends, aren't they the best? They're great. There is something like where all of a sudden it changes everything. Because today it's not like, oh, it's Sunday, tomorrow. No, you don't, For a lot of you, it's like you're not headed back. There's kind of this extended rest in it, and it's great. And along with all of that and all the other good stuff, and I think every boy is a pyromaniac at heart, so I love 4th of July. We are. It's like a developmental stage that we don't come out of. I've come to believe it. But there is this sense of really appreciating and engaging and stopping, hopefully at some level, to recognize that there's this profound freedom, and we use the term so lightly, but it's not light. It's not light at all. And after all of what it took to break away from the powers that were deeming to be oppressive in nature to establish freedom, this country had no freedom. Not until they could figure out, so what does freedom look like? And that's what the Declaration of Independence was, and eventually led to a constitution. Not until you could say, and this then is how we live as free people. This is how we live as free people. Now, we're not going to do it perfectly, but at least we've defined what it is. And with that backdrop, I want to invite us to continue a series we began last week, in which we have entitled, Where Life Flourishes, Engaging the Ten Commandments. Because I believe that the Ten Commandments really are God's way of saying, and this then is how you should live. Because if you recall something of the story, and maybe you're not that familiar with it at all, but these are the instructions given to Moses, these 10 defining instructions given to the people as they were freed from Egypt. And it's this is how this is what real freedom is, and how you can live in it and out of it. And so we do well today, and my heart for you is that we can hear in our hearts, God, I need to hear this as really, how do I live in freedom? And hear God's heart and passion. Because my experience, I'm just sharing a little bit of what I tend to think, which is that most of us are a little bit of a rebel at heart, some of us more than others. And when we hear the word commandment, everything in me just goes, whoa, I have an aversion to the very word commandments. How many of us like that word? It just, something goes off in you. It's like, there's a part of, for some of us, that are like rules. Rules were made to be, right? Commandments were made to be defied. It's that kind of spirit about it. And as I've been looking and thinking about this for years, we've been thinking, like going through the Ten Commandments, but as we got close, I'm realizing how it's profound how fundamentally wrong we are. I think we need to engage this whole underlying way in which we even think about what these 10 Commandments or anything else that God is bringing to bear on our lives, what they really represent. I think it says how ignorant we are of reality, that these are not the rules we think they are. We tend to think, well, there's my life, and I know, and everything that I want in it, and then there's this pasture over there of pleasure. And between me and the pasture and paths of pleasure lies God. And God has rules. And He has rules about what I should and shouldn't do, and how to keep me from going too far into the paths of pleasure. And since He's God, I guess I should, quote unquote, live out of that place of should and not do those things. After all, it's my duty. So we live at best, I think, as a people of should, as a people of duty. And I want to suggest to you, that is so wrong. We do not understand the reality of our real condition. When I was young, probably around the age of 11 and 12, my parents thought it'd be good for me to join the Boy Scouts. Some of you have experiences with the Boy Scouts. Well, I did a stint with the Boy Scouts. That tells you something right there. And so I think it was less than 2 years, because by about the second summer of that, it was time to go to Boy Scout camp, which is held at, some of you know, Emerald Bay, Catalina. So there's just this one little bay they have, and they have the camp there. And I went over there with a horrible attitude and, was just ready kind of dissing everything because I didn't want the rules. I didn't want to be told when to go to sleep, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I discovered, apparently they look down upon you getting on a boat and going off to some other place without permission. And so when I returned from camp, I was told that I was free from Boy Scouts. That's the truth. And I kind of look upon it as that kind of defines my life. I just kind of fight against rules. It's the way I see them. But I've been reminded that that's actually entirely the wrong view. So much of what I've been trying to forge in life as I moved on in life was trying to learn and face the consequences of many of the values that were there. But more importantly, Boy Scouts, I did realize, they left me with a different image. Last week I found this, probably 40 years later. It's the official Boy Scout compass. And I think we do well. It's on eBay. It's Larry. You can get it. But I think we do well to realize that what we're really being invited to engage as we hear God's heart in these commandments is much more like a compass. We all know that a compass is really that which is designed to navigate ourselves to the destiny that we need to get to, where we will flourish. And the fascinating thing about the compass and all of its simplicity is that 40 years later, I can let it loose, and guess what it finds? True north, because that never changes. It's rooted in what is. It's not an argument about what we want or what we think is best or what we should do. It's what is. There is a true north, and this will find it. And the 10 Commandments are really the beginning of God saying this then to the people. He's not saying these are arbitrary rules. He's really saying this is absolute reality. He's not saying, these are rules, you can decide if you want to break them or not, and we can negotiate them. He's saying these can't be changed because they are what is. And as I mentioned last week, these are not the rules that you break. These are the rules that if you violate them, you'll be the one that's left broken because they're not changing. They're like gravity or a plumb line. You don't say, I'm going to break the rule of gravity. It's like, no, you don't, because gravity is just bigger. It's part of reality. And this, then, is what we find as we engage these rules. And this is the heart of God who's saying, I brought you out to be able to live in freedom. Now let me tell you how to live. And so we begin with these words where we begin in Exodus, where we read in verses 1 and 2, and Joel began last week, where it says, Then God gave the people all these instructions. And he began, I am the Lord your God who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. And I would tell you to reflect for even a moment, just take that in, the place of your slavery. See, we have this idea like, you know what? God comes and gives all these rules to people who are free so that they won't have too much, fun. But they're already free. Now, these words were given to a people who had been enslaved in Egypt for 400 years. These are people who had been enslaved through generations. These are people who didn't even know what freedom was anymore. They didn't have a clarity within themselves about what human rights were or human rest was. So God is coming to tell them, let me declare to you how you live in freedom, because they didn't even know how to live in freedom. And the truth is, that's God's heart for us. We may not grasp it, but the truth is, we think he's speaking to people who are free and trying to bring them into bondage. He's speaking to us who are really actually far more in bondage than we can grasp. And he's trying to bring us back out of that into reality and into freedom. And so he's saying, this is then how you live. This is how you live. And he begins then in verse 3 to go on, you must not have any other God but me. The first thing he says is, that you need to have me be God. I am the true center. You and I think we can choose the center of our lives, and we can. There's only one real center. There's only one source of your life. There's only one who can actually say, You were created in my image. This is who you are as a human being. There's only one. There's only one who truly can bring all the broken pieces of our lives together. There's only one who could do that for Israel, and there's only one who could do that for us. We live these very compartmentalized lives, I think, for many of us, right? I mean, we kind of have multiple aspects of ourselves. So you might have the role of being a woman in this culture, a man in this culture, of being older or younger, of being academic, or like you have this knowledge and then you have this job. And each of these become pieces and parts of who we are. And you kind of are trying to find your identity in all them together. And that's okay, because they are also very interesting parts of who we are, right? We all have diverse parts. We might say, well, there's kind of the athletic me or the artistic me, whatever. But God is the one who is the center. From Him, He's the only one who can speak and say, but this is who you are beyond all those. This is what unifies those. I am the one center you can come to. I'm the one who doesn't know you just through those limited aspects of what you've done. He is the true center. And He's saying you can only be free when you actually have the right and proper center. So it shouldn't surprise us that He then goes on, as we pick up today with kind of the second commandment, and He begins in verse 3, and you can follow with me together, where He says, you must not make for yourself an idol of any kind, or an image of anything in the heavens, or on the earth, or in the sea. You must not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God who will not tolerate your affection for any other gods. I lay the sins of the parents upon their children. The entire family is affected. Even children in the third and fourth generations of those who reject me. But I lavish unfailing love for 1,000 generations on those who love me and obey my commands. He's saying in these words, as he began by saying that I am the one to be your center, he's saying, and so let's now quickly address this. You need to not make other centers for your life where you form things that aren't what they're supposed to be and you try to make them that. Where you try to take the goods and make them God. You cannot do this. This will take you out of freedom. And he addresses this. Now, this is what the scriptures speak of as idolatry, and most are familiar with the term. But we don't associate ourselves with it because typically as kind of modern Western people, we don't see ourselves participating in traditional forms of idolatry, which we think of as when somebody has carved up a stone and they put it on the mantle and they live and they give it, they give it great honor and they live in fear and they have to have it and they want to appease it. So the idea of making something in that form, unless you're talking about an iPhone, is not usually considered idolatry. But that's the icon, right? If you lose it, you're like, oh my God, I'm done. It's like, no, you're not done. But we fear that. But generally speaking, we don't. But here's the reality that we have to really grasp. That the nature of idolatry is not that. The nature of idolatry is that which we are all doing all the time. Because the truth is, the nature of idolatry is not the materials they're made of, but the devotion and power they are given. The real nature is when we give devotion and power to anything that is not worthy of it and cannot satisfy it. That's running through our lives so much. There's so much that rivals for us to give ourselves to it. To be our source of security or significance. As Tim Keller says, an idol is anything more fundamental to God than God to your happiness, to your meaning in life or identity. It is anything we rest our heart in for security and significance more than God. We develop idols out of anything that we love, fear, or serve more than God. And that starts to open up a whole lot that's running through us. And probably running through us, we think, those people had very defined, gods that they were told to fear. And many cultures today may still have many ideas of such. And the truth is we have even more. We have even more. We're a people who can be even more lost. We have more images coming at us every minute and day. The term pop culture only arose not long ago when, there were airwaves that could kind of, start deciding what the popular song was. And then there would be a song that everybody knew, or a fashion, and that would be part of pop culture, popular culture. Nowadays, oh my gosh, with social media, we're just, you and I have a million messages coming at us saying, this is what matters, and you better get it. And it's really great. And you should love this artist and this song, and you should get the without almost any thought as to whether it's true. We live at a time in which there's this incredible individualism that tells us that it doesn't even matter what's true, it just matters that you have an opinion. And that whatever it's the real thing that matters is that you have an opinion on things. I'm sorry, that is not the only thing that matters. What matters is how well you and I live in accordance with reality. So we have a lot of lostness going on around us. And a lot that tells us about what should matter, what we give our lives to. We're so confused. And so we have a lot going on and that relates to the challenge of idolatry. But let me note these things in addition about the nature of idolatry. One, idolatry is the root of all other sin and causes the deepest of consequences. The second command is kind of saying at this very point, you've got to deal with this, because out of this, so much more comes. Everything emanates from you getting very clear on directing your heart, your soul, your life, to giving your power and devotion to what is right and true. In Romans, the book of Romans, the biblical book, the Apostle Paul's writing, and he's trying to really capture the whole of what's real about God and life. It's kind of a heavy book, but there it begins. It begins there by saying that this about our condition. He's speaking of those who went before him, but of us as well. It says, for although they knew God, and here it is, they neither glorified him as God, nor gave thanks to him. Rather, what? They exchanged the truth of God for a lie. And they worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator. And then, after this, Paul immediately begins to talk about really destructive and tragic things that run through humanity. But the point of that is he's saying all of these run out of humanity. Why? Because of this fundamental problem. This is the root of it, is this exchange where we've said what really is the reality of what only a God who is true and living and which we emanate from and can love us at the core of our being, only He can provide. And when we exchange the Creator for creation, we've got a problem. Martin Luther, the great reformer, said that you never break any other commandment without first breaking this one. Because at the core, this is what your heart is doing. It's kind of the problem of the heart. So you don't just lie, which is one of the commandments we're going to engage later. You lie because you think something is so important it's worth lying for. You don't just steal but you probably steal because you think something is so important to have that you'll compromise for it. The things we do because of what we actually believe is going to satisfy. So he's saying, engage this first. This is the core of all other things. And he goes on to say, God, that this carries on like nothing else into future generations. As God said, it's strong to hear, but God said, and I will punish them from even out to a third or fourth generation if they turn from this. And while that's hard to hear, I think the truth is, when God speaks of punishing, more often the language is, and I will give them over to their own desires. And I think that helps us to understand the nature of that. He's saying, if you desire this and you go after it, there are repercussions, and I will not be able to pull and control you from those repercussions. So I'm going to allow this to happen. And there's huge consequences. And I think most of us, if we've ever become a parent, and you can imagine if you're not a parent, this truth, you kind of get hit with, wow, I'm going to be imparting my deepest values to my kids. And I know what I want to say in word, but values are not ultimately taught, they're caught. And what I really do find important in my life is what they're going to pick up on. And that's scary. It is. It's intimidating. It's like, what I don't have together is going to carry on. So what the parents worship, children worship. And so it's kind of hits us at that level, and it's just a fundamental truth. There's the trajectory that we set by what we decide is valuable will carry on for generations. But the corollary God speaks out is so profound, so beautiful. He says, but if you really get what your values right, if you really understand that I am the source of all things, and you live according to that, and you put that first, guess what? My love will be flowing out through 1,000 generations. That's just incredible. It's powerful. But it comes down to this really important choice. It is the first among all the other elements that arise. And Paul's description in the text in Romans also says that idolatry is exchanging then the creator for the creation, which helps put forward a second point, and that is this, that idolatry reflects a disordered love, if you will, often making good things into something that they're not. I think it's very helpful to understand that while we typically think of idols as evil things, and it's fair language for it, but really the thing itself is never evil. It's what we do with it. It's often and usually generally a good thing, but we have given it it's our giving of devotion and power to it that it does not have in itself. There is the evil. It's what we have made of it. So we can look at it as the problem, but the problem is it's often something good. So we want to say, let's just get rid of that. We're really on the wrong track. Because it's not it in and of itself. It's what we have made it to be. We're the ones who form idols. As Tim Keller captures this so potently, he says, sin isn't only doing bad things. It is more fundamentally, listen to this, making good things into ultimate things. And there is the greater reality that I think a lot of us face, making good things into ultimate things. Sin is building your life and meaning on anything, even a very good thing, more than on God. And when we make something that's good, ultimate, what we're doing is we're taking something that's really good in what it is, but we're trying to make it something that it's not. That is the challenge we face. And it will ultimately not only disappoint us, but it can destroy us because we give our whole being and devotion to it. We seek it for what it cannot give us and provide. So a good thing might be the heart that we have for our spouse and family, and if one's married, then they might have. But if that is the primary thing that we find our purpose and identity in, what happens? We become emotionally dependent, we become resentful, and we grow to be consumed and lose perspective on things, and then we kind of start to try to take control of them to get their affections, and we have problems. And we could run this through everything. If the primary purpose and your identity and all of your source of meaning is found in your work and your career, what happens? Are you good at work? No, you really kind of lose perspective. You become very driven. You become very competitive. You become very anxious. And pretty soon your life gets imbalanced and there's problems. But is work a good thing? It's a great thing. But when you try to make it more than what it is, we have problems. If it's our identity, if it's our hope, if I achieve it, it's going to hurt us. Probably I think one of the most profound is sex. Sex is something that's a gift from God. It's a pleasure. It's that which has got a deep drive to unite people and that which creates life and creates covenant together and bonds that covenant. But if one finds their deeper sense of purpose and identity and somehow is in their own kind of sexuality, then what happens? What I would say is that, and many know, is that what we find is the deeper connection we're longing for, which is there, becomes more elusive to us. And we just find an emptiness that just gets greater and greater. And the very sense of connection we're trying to find, it's never there. And we degrade ourselves in trying to find it. A good thing, but we're turning it into what it's not. And the same could be true, dare I say, even on this 4th of July weekend in America. It can become true of patriotism, our love of country. We should have a great love of country. And we should be able to say that, we're proud to be, of what this country represents. But if we kind of allow that and our sense of nationality, I'm an American, and that suddenly becomes some kind of personal pride, something happens. If we're finding our identity and our sense of security in that, we're going to fight for, we're going to kind of move from, I really respect the qualities of this country, to somehow I'm superior and special because of being a citizen of this country. This country is founded on the idea that there is unalienable rights that were given by who? By God. But suddenly it's like they're given to our citizenship. And when we start to mess with that, we're really going the wrong direction. And that becomes a nationalism that takes on spiritual tones and leads to Hitlers and many other horrible things that can go forward. Taking a good thing and making it what it's not. And the same can be true of just morality, where we say, good moral striving, trying to be a good person, that's a good thing. But is it the greatest thing? No, God, who's got grace, is the greater thing. But when we get so into my well-being is that I'm a moral person, and I even have religious elements to my morality, what happens? I'm kind of suddenly I have this superiority, and I start to really alienate, and I start to turn the world into good people and bad people. I'm usually part of the good people. That's the way it works. And so, but when I fail myself, when I fail to live up to my moral standards, I am devastated. Because those standards are what I placed my whole identity in, is being this morally right person. We're devastated. It's always taking what is good and making it ultimate. There's only one who can really say that you're okay, that you're loved, and then really define you and say, daughter, that's God. And we need to really engage this reality. Thirdly, idolatry is essentially a lie. It's a lie that we've accepted, for idols will never satisfy. They will never satisfy. The truth is that our idols never satisfy, but for the briefest of moments. The Old Testament prophet spoke these words that many of us are familiar with. They really do capture so well what we face in life. God says to the prophets, be appalled at this in Jeremiah. O heavens, and shudder with great horror. He's saying this is really the worst thing that can happen. Do you understand what the condition of humanity is? You can hear him saying this to the whole heavens. My people, the ones who I have brought out to bring freedom to all of humanity, my people have committed two sins. First, they have forsaken me. There's the first commandment. The spring of living water, the very source of water that they will not find elsewhere. But secondly, and here's the breaking of the second commandment we're looking at, they have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water. The cisterns are what they, carved out to be able to contain water in. So one would look at them and say, wow, I created a container over here, and it's been filled up, and it's got everything I need. And it's going there and realizing, oh my gosh, it doesn't. It can't even hold anything. I got to it and found out it was dry. It was empty. It couldn't satisfy me. How many of us have had those moments, right? Where you kind of go, oh, I thought if I bought this, it would make me really happy, but I don't even wear it anymore, Or I thought if I achieved this, I was listening to someone share last night this profound article written by someone that's been a part of kind of the Hollywood industry for a long time and doing assessments, and they're saying that it's usually the most tragic point in any life is when that one person does make it in the entertainment field. That's really, really right after that there is one of the highest levels of overdoses, depression, because all of a sudden, you can't tell me who I am. I thought it was going to make me. I wake up and I'm the same person. Oh no. You ever had that? Oh no, I'm the same person. Now you're hopeless because we turned away from the one voice, the one face that can speak to us and say, no, I'm the one who tells you who you are, and I will. But there's the challenge to us, is coming up empty. Psalm 135, the writer says, the idols of the nations are silver and gold, made by the hands of men. They have mouths, but they cannot speak, eyes, but they cannot see. They have ears, but cannot hear, nor is there breath in their mouths. Those who make them will be like them, and so will all who trust in them. Saying, that thing you carve, it might have the form of a mouth, but guess what? It's never going to speak to you where you need to be spoken to and at the depth of that. It's never going to hear the depth of the cries of your soul. You're hoping that somehow that getting that or getting them or getting that attention or being affirmed by them, they can't. That depth comes only from God. You think that they're going to be able to meet you in the dead of night in your darkness? No, they won't. Only God can. These things cannot fulfill. And we do well to stop and just awaken to that. I think that's God's heart, is to say, okay, you're right. So much of what I kind of entrust or turn myself or put hope in can't. And that's the beginning. That's such a valuable point. But he also says there something interesting, the psalmist. He says, those who make them what? Will become like them. And that's the last point I want to make about the nature of idolatry. And that is that idolatry defines us because we become what we worship. What we say this is of greatest worth, we give our souls to, our aspirations to, and we want it, and we want to join it and enter it, and that is where we will become more like it. In a quote that's attributed to Ralph Waldo Emerson, he said this, the gods we worship, and this is a powerful line, they write their names on our faces. Be sure of that. And a man will worship something, have no doubt about that either. He may think that his tribute is paid in secret in the dark recesses of his heart, but it will out. That which dominates will determine his life and character. Therefore, it behooves us to be careful what we worship. For what we are worshiping, we are becoming. We do well to realize that what we give our focus to, it shapes us. Several years ago, Sports Illustrated told a very telling story in the kind of backstory section. It was the tragic story of Rico Leroy Marshall. He was an 18-year-old senior at Foresta High School in Maryland. And it seems that Rico had everything going for him. He had a scholarship to the University of South Carolina. He had taken first place in his senior talent show. So this guy's ending at the very top of everything in his school. His popularity among his peers was remarkable. And one night, he's driving there at the end of school, home from a school basketball game on Friday, when he was stopped by the local county police. And there on the seat of his car, the front seat, he had these chunks of crack, which is kind of compounded cocaine. And not wanting to face the consequences, he grabbed it and he inhaled it. So that night, he's finally returned to his parents' home, where he had convulsions. And that night, they rushed him to the hospital, and he died. As they went to his home, what they found on his wall, the very first thing that he probably saw every morning, as every teenager does, and the last thing he probably saw every night, was a poster. And the poster was of Len Bias. Len was a star at the University of Maryland basketball team. So to him, he was the icon of many a young boy. And he looked to him. But Len was drafted number 1 in the NBA draft by the Boston Celtics, which is rather remarkable, some of you know. But on the night of that draft, he overdosed and died. And this young man, Rico, had been looking at this as his hero. This was what he put in front of him. This is what he sought to emulate. And the tragedy is that he had become what he worshipped. And he had lived out the same destruction that went before him. And I think for so many of us, we do well to realize, what are we following? And where does it lead? And the question maybe for us is, and what is the poster on your wall? What is it that you and I keep before us? Where do our minds go? What do we hope in? I want to kind of conclude our time in that question and giving us an opportunity to just really assess what are the rivals of our hearts. I think we all have rivals. I have things rivaling for what is only God can meet and who God should be to me. God becomes more periphery. I can feel it when I start to kind of get more into this or so into this, when I'm more excited about this. And I need to check that. Why am I more excited to watch this sports game or go do this? It's not that I shouldn't be excited about it. It's just that something tells me I think it's going to satisfy me more than God. I need to kind of stop and kind of shake myself free. What's rivaling for heart? So I want to give you an opportunity and to just quietly reflect in your own heart as I pose these 3 questions that can be, among many, helpful questions to you to reflect on as you think about the idols. The first is this: where does my imagination take me? Where does my imagination take me? One way to find it is to trail to that place that we go when nothing else demands our attention and we're kind of free to let our minds go. Where do we go to find that sense of well-being, that sense of satisfaction? I don't mean a daydream here or there, but I mean the constant, regular pattern that we follow. What might that be for you? Archbishop William Temple once said, "Your religion is what you do with your solitude." It's a profound statement. Where do you tend to go in your solitude? Where do you tend to find that comfort, that place of security, significance? Just think about that for a moment. Second good question to help identify is, how do I spend money? How do you spend money? And the reason that's so valuable is not just to get off on some trip on money. It's because money generally has a lot of meaning. It carries no power in itself. It's what we give to it. So it becomes a very interesting indication of how we're working out security and significance is through money. Most of us would say, I have never sacrificed anything on an altar. Now think for a minute, what did you buy last year? What's your Amazon, invoices look like? You sure you haven't sacrificed something? You sure you didn't pursue something? They say that if you want to know your idol, look where you're most likely to overspend money. Where you spend more than you have because something's driving you towards it. And I know that's not always the case. There's sometimes just a lot of bills to pay. But think about what drives you, what you're most likely to say, oh, but I have to, and we lose perspective. Right? Think about that thing where you thought, why did I think that was going to do so much for me? I mean, I almost have like 4 teenagers in my house right now. So trust me, I see this all the time. I see a lot of disappointment, not to mention my own. I got to. Really? Got to? That's kind of scary. That sounds almost spiritual. It never satisfies. How do we spend money? And thirdly, what about you can give you a sense of superiority over others? What is it? What's a quality you have? Probably a good quality. It might be knowledge or beauty or success or personality, but because it's a natural source of well-being for you, it can become what you find ultimate worth in. And start to feel like, well, because I have this quality, I tend to look down on others. That a little bit. Maybe a quiet, unspoken judgment or sense of superiority. Educated people often feel their education is that because they have been shaped to think that having knowledge is itself something of ultimate worth, and it gets out of perspective, whereas knowledge can serve, but it can't secure. So that's just an example. Think what that might be. as you think about what those rivals in your heart, those things that want to rule over you, those things that you may struggle not to give a power and devotion to, I want to suggest that God is present right here. And I believe this with all of my heart. I believe God's present here right now. And He sees in each of us more than what we can imagine along these lines. This is what He is vying for. And if we can hear His passion, He is looking deep into our souls. He is looking at us as a spouse or lover would look upon one and realize that I may be the one that you said you committed your life to. I'm the one who should have that place of honor, but there's another picture in your wallet right next to mine. And the spouse who knows that. And God's looking at us saying, that place that my picture and my picture alone should be, there's another picture in your wallet. Or like a parent who sees that their child is running off with a stranger. And any parent would want to go, I got to go and stop that. I will not let them go off in the arms of the stranger. That's not their parent. I know they do not have their best interests. They're going to exploit them. But then the parent realizes, but they're adult human beings. I can't stop them. And they just passionately, God has seen us, you, running off into the arms of strangers who cannot satisfy, who don't have your best. And we've made them to be somebody they're not. And it may not even be the strangers as dangerous as the fact that we've made them to be somebody we should wander after. And God's passion. And Jesus said, and I want to close with this, Jesus says that He has literally come to really reconcile this very thing. He's come to reveal to whom God really is, who He truly is. And He's come to make God known and to set right us from the enslavement that we've lived in all of our lives and all of our days. And Jesus said, do you want to know what is coming? It's the kingdom of God, the reign and rule of God. It's breaking in. And you know what it looks like? And He tells that story that many of us know. We think of this prodigal son. He says, you want to know what it looks like? Here's your story. It's a story of a father who had 2 sons. And the youngest one, who shouldn't even be getting the inheritance, he goes to his father, give me the inheritance so I can go off. Well, it's not time yet. Why would you? What's he saying? I want to get rid of you, but I want to take the goods. The goods of life. There he is. He's got it all messed up. He's leaving the real source, taking the goods, thinking he's going to be satisfied. And he goes off to what? A distant country. A place in which one's always alienated, never knows their true identity. He goes off to that place, and what happens? If you remember the story, he gets exploited. Everybody uses up his money, and he's left what? Not even having the food the pigs have. And then it says he's just so utterly lost. And it says he comes to his senses. That's the word that Jesus uses. He says, but he has them when he comes to his senses and realizes, wow, I had more dignity even as a slave back in my father's home and I was a son, but I'll just go back as a slave to restore something. And it says he starts to make his way back, and there he's met by the father, who just wraps his arm around, pours out, because the father's heart has been, I want you so bad to be back here, because as you're going to see, I'm the one who can call you son or daughter. I'm the one who can speak that dignity as he gives him the ring of authority from himself back to the son. He puts, remember, the sandals on his feet to say, here's your dignity. I'm going to make sure you are who you were meant to be because you're degrading yourself. It's an incredible story and so much more to it. But God's heart for you and I is that we come to our senses. And I want to invite us to just take a moment and just to have you be able to just, if you kind of identify, there's things I make too much out of. Too much on this music star, too much on this clothing, too much on being popular here, too much on these friends, too much on this career. If there's anything, I just want to give you a moment to just talk to God about it. Express that to God. And express to God what you recognize as far as what it can't meet, because that's what God wants us to say. It isn't going to meet it. I get it, God. You will, but it can't. Let's pray. Jesus, we We invite you to come even now to be with us. We invite you, Holy Spirit, just to bear your presence upon our minds, our thoughts, our hearts. Come, Holy Spirit. God, we welcome your presence even now. We welcome your voice to speak to us, even as we speak to you of these things. Just bring anything you recognize that may be rivaling as an altar, as an idol to God. We recognize, God, that you've sent Christ to come and to rescue us, to redeem us, to restore us rightfully with your face, which alone we can look to. And we can look metaphorically to your face, that presence that we know in our spirits to be real. And there find that love that is eternal, that knows us. And there find that authority that sets all things right in its orbit. And we bring the orbit of our own lives to your orbit, that we might be aligned around you and the very source of life. We give you thanks. And we just, some of us, God, want to affirm that you really are our true God. And we welcome and seek your love afresh. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. I want to invite us to stand and let's worship together.